Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am coming to you with a Victober themed Poetry Thursday. So I recently picked up this little anthology of English Victorian poetry, and I really just wanted to get into Victorian poetry this Victober. That was one of my main goals for the month, was to try to experiment and read some authors that I've never read before. I am very, very inexperienced in Victorian poetry. I know it's a really wide genre, and a lot of people really love Victorian poetry, and I'm sure I will turn out to be one of those people as I continue along my journey with Victorian poetry. But since I picked up this anthology and I'm kind of sampling a bunch of different poets through it, I thought it might be kind of fun to have a few Victober themed Poetry Thursdays this month. This is a Dover Thrift edition, and so the notes are fairly sparse here, so this may or may not be something that you're interested in if you're trying to get into Victorian poetry. I'm kind of just Googling things as I go through and as I read more, but included in this collection is, of course, Alfred Lord Tennyson, the Brownings, Edward Lear, Thomas Hood, Emily Bronte, my favorite. I have read a lot of her poetry previously, and I really, really love her poetry. There will definitely be a Poetry Thursday themed around one of her poems soon, I hope. Matthew Arnold, George Meredith, who I've heard quite a bit about, of course, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Christina Rossetti, Lewis Carroll, that's interesting, William Morris, Swinburne, Gerard Manley Hopkins, and some Oscar Wilde, I think we're kind of finishing out with. So this is a really interesting and comprehensive anthology so far. I would recommend it, but I would say there's been so few notes that I really think that might be a holdup for some people. Some people might really crave more context for the poems, and this edition really does not offer them. But today, as you can tell from the title of this video, we are going to be reading one of my new favorite poems. I'm really, really excited and pumped about this poem, and this is called Locksley Hall, and it's written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. So I believe this was written in the 1830s, and it actually is a couple of years prior to when Victoria came to the throne. I believe this was 1835 when he wrote this, but I do not believe it was published until 1840. So I'm counting it as Victorian. And so this is a really lovely sort of narrative poem that is written in rhyming couplets. I am a sucker for a rhyme. I think when people hear that you're into poetry, they think you must be like this really deep, introspective, or poetic person yourself, that you must be somebody who like draws meaning from everything and you're looking for really beautiful language. I'm really just on the hunt for a rhyme. And when poetry doesn't rhyme, I really struggle with it. It's hard to admit. I feel like that sounds silly. And those of you who are seriously into poetry are probably laughing at me and thinking that I'm a poser when I say that I enjoy poetry. I really do enjoy poetry, and I can enjoy blank verse, particularly when it is a narrative poem, but a rhyme just really makes me enjoy a poem so much more. This poem is actually about a rejected suitor, kind of a jilted lover, and he is coming back to his childhood home. And I didn't know this upon first read of the poem, and now I'm wishing I hadn't told you what the poem was about, because to me, as I was reading this, I thought this was about some sort of immortal, or maybe a ghost who was kind of coming back to a place that they had haunted, because really there is a very aged quality to the writing and to the character who is speaking in the poem that made me think he was probably some sort of ageless entity, some kind of immortal. I was thinking, you know, vampires here. I was just thinking somebody who was kind of cursed, a Melmoth the Wanderer type. Unfortunately, it is much more mundane than that. This is a guy who was rejected, but I do want to give you my initial thought for this poem because it might help you enjoy it a little bit more, because I still in my heart view this poem as being from the perspective of some sort of immortal. This is a bit of a longer poem, and I'm going to read it in its entirety because I think that you really need to hear all of it. It's just a really beautiful poem. And this was one of my first forays into Alfred Lord Tennyson, and I am a little bit in love with it. So hopefully this is a good sign, and it kind of tells me that Tennyson and I are going to get along. Comrades, leave me here a little While as yet 'tis early morn, leave me here, and when you want me, sound upon the bugle horn. 'Tis the place, and all around it, as of old the curlews call, dreary gleams about the moorland, flying over Locksley Hall. Locksley Hall that in the distance overlooks the sandy tracts and the hollow ocean ridges roaring into cataracts. Many a night from yonder ivied casement, ere I went to rest, did I look on great Orion sloping slowly to the west. Many a night I saw the Pleiads rising through the mellow shade, glitter like a swarm of fireflies tangled in a silver braid. Here about the beach I wandered, nourishing a youth sublime, with the fairy tales of science and the long result of time. When the centuries behind me like a fruitful land reposed, when I clung to all the present for the promise that it closed, when I dipped into the future far as human eye could see, saw the vision of the world and all the wonder that would be. In the spring a fuller crimson comes upon the robin's breast. In the spring the wanton lapwing gets himself another crest. In the spring a livelier iris changes on the burnished dove. In the spring a young man's fancy lightly turns to thoughts of love. Then her cheek was pale and thinner than should be for one so young, and her eyes on all my motions with a mute observance hung. And I said, my cousin Amy, speak and speak the truth to me. Trust me, cousin, all the current of my being sets to thee. On her pallid cheek and forehead came a color and a light, as I have seen the rosy red flushing in the northern night. And she turned, her bosom shaken with a sudden storm of sighs, all the spirit deeply dawning in the dark of hazel eyes, saying, I have hid my feelings, fearing they should do me wrong, saying, dost thou love me, cousin? Weeping, I have loved thee long. Love took up the glass of time and turned it in his glowing hands. Every moment lightly shaken ran itself in golden sands. Love took up the harp of life and smote on all the chords with might, smote the chord of self that trembling passed in music out of sight. Many a morning on the moorland did we hear the copses ring, and her whisper thronged my pulses with the fullness of the spring. Many an evening by the waters did we watch the stately ships, and our spirits rushed together at the touching of the lips. Oh, my cousin shallow-hearted, oh, my Amy, mine no more. Oh, the dreary, dreary moorland, oh, the barren, barren shore. Falser than all fancy fathoms, falser than all songs have sung, puppet to a father's threat, and servile to a shrewish tongue. Is it well to wish thee happy, having known me, to decline on a range of lower feelings and a narrower heart than mine? Yet it shall be, thou shalt lower to his level day by day, what is fine within thee growing coarse to sympathize with clay. As the husband is, the wife is. Thou art mated with a clown, and the grossness of his nature will have weight to drag thee down. He will hold thee when his passion shall have spent its novel force, something better than his dog, a little dearer than his horse. What is this? His eyes are heavy. Think not they are glazed with wine. Go to him, it is thy duty. Kiss him, take his hand in thine. It may be my lord is weary, that his brain is overwrought. Soothe him with thy finer fancies, touch him with thy lighter thought. He will answer to the purpose, easy things to understand. Better thou wert dead before me, though I slew thee with my hand. Better thou and I were lying, hidden from the heart's disgrace, rolled in one another's arms, and silent in a last embrace. Cursed be the social wants that sin against the strength of youth. Cursed be the social lies that warp us from the living truth. Cursed be the sickly forms that err from honest nature's rule. Cursed be the gold that gilds the straightened forehead of the fool. Well, 'tis well that I should bluster, hadst thou less unworthy proved. Would to God, for I had loved thee more than ever wife was loved. Am I mad that I should cherish that which bears but bitter fruit? I will pluck it from my bosom, though my heart be at the root. Never, though my mortal summers to such length of years should come, as the many-wintered crow that leads the clanging rookery home. Where is comfort? In division of the records of the mind? Can I part her from herself, and love her as I knew her kind? I remember one that perished, sweetly did she speak and move. Such a one do I remember, whom to look at was to love. Can I think of her as dead, and love her for the love she bore? No, she never loved me truly. Love is love for evermore. Comfort, comfort scorned of devils, this is truth the poet sings, that a sorrow's crown of sorrow is remembering happier things. Drug thy memories, lest thou learn it, lest thy heart be put to proof, in the dead unhappy night, and when the rain is on the roof. Like a dog he hunts in dreams, and thou art staring at the wall, where the dying night lamp flickers, and the shadows rise and fall. Then a hand shall pass before thee, pointing to his drunken sleep, to thy widowed marriage pillows, to the tears that thou wilt weep. Thou shalt hear the never, never, whispered by the phantom years, and a song from out the distance in the ringing of thine ears. And an eye shall vex thee, looking ancient kindness on thy pain. Turn thee on thy pillow, get thee to thy rest again. Nay, but nature brings thee solace, for a tender voice will cry, 'tis a purer life than thine, a lip to drain thy trouble dry. Baby lips will laugh me down, my latest rival brings thee rest. Baby fingers, waxen touches, press me from the mother's breast. Oh, the child who clothes the father with a dearness not his due, half is thine and half is his, it will be worthy of the two. Oh, I see thee old and formal, fitted to thy petty part, with a little horde of maxims preaching down a daughter's heart. They were dangerous guides, the feelings. She herself was not exempt. Truly, she herself had suffered. Perish in thy self-contempt. Overlive it, lower yet, be happy. Wherefore should I care? I myself must mix with action, lest I wither by despair. What is that which I should turn to, lighting upon days like these? Every door is barred with gold, and opens but to golden keys. Every gate is thronged with suitors, all the markets overflow. I have but an angry fancy, what is that which I should do? I had been content to perish, falling on the foeman's ground, when the ranks are rolled in vapor and the winds are laid with sound. But the jingling of the guinea helps the hurt that honor feels, and the nations do but murmur, snarling at each other's heels. Can I but relive in sadness, I will turn that earlier page. Hide me from my deep emotion, O thou wondrous mother age. Make me feel the wild pulsation that I felt before the strife, when I heard my days before me in the tumult of my life. Yearning for the large excitement that the coming years would yield, eager-hearted as a boy when first he leaves his father's field, and at night along the dusky highway near and nearer drawn, sees in heaven the light of London flaring like a dreary dawn. And his spirit leaps within him to be gone before him then, underneath the light he looks at, in among the throngs of men. Men my brothers, men the workers, ever reaping something new, that which they have done, but earnest of the things that they shall do. For I dipped into the future, far as human eye could see, saw the vision of the world and all the wonder that would be, saw the heavens fill with commerce, argosies of magic sails, pilots of the purple twilight dropping down with costly bales, heard the heavens fill with shouting, and there rained a ghastly dew from the nation's airy navies grappling in the central blue. Far along the worldwide whisper of the south wind rushing warm, with the standards of the peoples plunging through the thunderstorm, till the war drum throbbed no longer, and the battle flags were furled, in the parliament of man, the federation of the world. There the common sense of most shall hold a fretful realm in awe, and the kindly earth shall slumber, lapped in universal law. So I triumphed ere my passion sweeping through me left me dry, left me with the palsied heart, and left me with the jaundiced eye. I to which all order festers, all things here are out of joint. Science moves, but slowly, slowly, creeping on from point to point. Slowly comes a hungry people, as a lion creeping nigher glares at one that nods and winks behind a slowly dying fire. Yet I doubt not through the ages one increasing purpose runs, and the thoughts of men are widened with the process of the suns. What is that to him that reaps not harvest of his youthful joys, though the deep heart of existence beat forever like a boy's? Knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers, and I linger on the shore, and the individual withers, and the world is more and more. Knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers, and he bears a laden breast, full of sad experience, moving toward the stillness of his rest. Hark, my merry comrades call me, sounding on the bugle horn, they to whom my foolish passion were a target for their scorn. Shall it not be scorn to me to harp on such a mouldered string? I am shamed through all my nature to have loved so slight a thing. Weakness to be wroth with weakness, woman's pleasure, woman's pain. Nature made them blinder motions, bounded in a shallower brain. Woman is the lesser man, and all thy passions matched with mine are as moonlight unto sunlight, and as water unto wine. Here at least, where nature sickens, nothing. Ah, for some retreat, deep in yonder shining orient where my life began to beat. Where in wild Maratha battle fell my father evil-starred, I was left a trampled orphan and a selfish uncle's ward. Or to burst all links of habit, there to wander far away, on from island unto island at the gateways of the day. Larger constellations burning, mellow moons and happy skies, breadths of tropic shade and palms in cluster, knots of paradise. Never comes the trader, never floats in European flag, slides the bird over lustrous woodland, swings the trailer from the crag. Droops the heavy blossomed bower, hangs the heavy fruited tree, summer isles of Eden lying in dark purple spheres of sea. There methinks would be enjoyment more than in this march of mind, in the steamship and the railway, in the thoughts that shake mankind. Mother age, from mine I knew not, help me as when life begun, ripped the hills and rolled the waters, flashed the lightnings, weigh the sun. Oh, I see the crescent promise of my spirit hath not set, ancient founts of inspiration well through all my fancy yet. Howsoever these things be, a long farewell to Locksley Hall. Now for me the woods may wither, now for me the roof tree fall. Comes a vapor from the margin, blackening over heath and holt, cramming all the blast before it, in its breast a thunderbolt. Let it fall on Locksley Hall, with rain or hail or fire or snow, for the mighty wind arises, roaring seaward, and I go. On a second read, it is a little bit more evident that this is just kind of a jilted lover here, because really it's very, very evident that all of the things that I took for signs of age were just him kind of observing the landscape and talking about Locksley Hall, but there's a lot of interesting imagery around him kind of gazing into the future and what he thinks the future is going to be. And some of that is remarkably on point. Some of that we have seen come to pass. So it is really, really interesting from that perspective. But I mean, some of these couplets are just absolutely beautiful. Towards the very start of the poem, there is, love took up the glass of time and turned it in his glowing hands. Every moment lightly shaken ran itself in golden sands. I mean, I just love it. I really love the imagery there. Another of my favorites is knowledge comes but wisdom lingers, and I linger on the shore, and the individual withers, and the world is more and more. And as a character, the narrator is rather fascinating because he does play the victim a bit here at the start, and then as the poem goes on, you learn that he is pretty sexist and he's also pretty racist. And so he, as a character, kind of evolves through the poem, and you're kind of wondering if he is telling you the real version of events, and maybe at the beginning he had a particular story in mind that he wanted you to come away with. And then as the poem goes on, real shades of himself start to come through, which I think is really interesting, and something that he uses to perfection here, Alfred Lord Tennyson, is kind of alliteration and also repetition. There are a lot of lines with alliteration in them, but the repetition, I think, is done so well, and I love repetition in poetry. Repetition always feels poetic to me, even in prose writing, if it's done very well. Sometimes it can be heavy-handed, but I do really like repeated phrases or repeated words when they are meant to be kind of conveying something. So the best instance of this, I think, was also towards the beginning of the poem when he is talking about the spring, when he falls in love with his cousin. In the spring, a fuller crimson comes upon the robin's breast. In the spring, the wanton lapwing gets himself another crest. In the spring, a livelier iris changes on the burnished dove. In the spring, a young man's fancy lightly turns to thoughts of love. Just a really lovely poem. I'm conjuring up images of a manor house out on the heath, out in Yorkshire. I'm picturing very north of England here. I don't know if that's where this is actually intended to be set or what Tennyson intended you to think of, but I automatically thought of kind of a Bronte image, foggy moors and Locksley Hall being rather dreary, rather dilapidated. It felt very Gothic to me, and it felt very old, and I think that's probably why I initially thought this was a little bit more of a supernatural poem than what it actually is. Locksley Hall, I also went into thinking that it might be about Robin Hood, which sounds really silly now that I think about it, but Locksley's where Robin Hood lives, isn't it? So I thought it was going to be a good old medieval poem, because Tennyson is probably most famous nowadays for writing The Lady of Shalott, which is an Arthurian retelling. But I know that Alfred Lord Tennyson has a longer form narrative poem that is all about King Arthur, the Idylls of the King, and it's written in blank verse. I'm feeling like I would love it. I'm feeling like from the small experience that I've had with him so far, I am really going to enjoy Tennyson. So I have read quite a few of his poems that are in this collection, and I have a collection of his kind of collected poetry across his entire career. So I've already read quite a bit of Tennyson, but so far this is my favorite. And I would love to know down below how you feel about Alfred Lord Tennyson, if you are reading any poetry this month for Victober. But that's going to be all from me today. I hope that you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Happy Victober. Goodbye.